Hi, welcome to God Stories today. My name's Chris Thompson. You guys coming? Hello and welcome to God Stories Today. I feel quite intimidated today because I'm in the presence of a BBC radio presenter and BBC television presenter as well. Francis Finn, welcome.
Intimidated, Chris. Come on.
She also called her Fran, so that's great from now on. So it's Fran, not Fran, Fran.
Fran, I'd say,
Fran.
Fran.
I'm dyslexic, so it gets into my head in a moment. But I interviewed Donna Birrell from the BBC about a year or so, and she very kindly let me into a studio as well, and it was intimidating to say the least. But she was just so lovely. But it was great to sort of be in the presence of the BBC and learn how they do stuff. So I sit here humble and just thinking, please let the cameras work.
Not at all. But it's funny, do you know, I still, when I go in the middle of the night on a Sunday morning, when I still do a show, in Nottingham, and I see those big letters, BBC, I still get that little sort of, oh, thank you, God. This is something, isn't it? It is. I love it.
We will go on to a God story in a minute, but as you're on that, if I may, because we will lead into what you're doing at the moment, and this is maybe a preamble. When I was in Donna Birrell's radio studio, the BBC radio studio in the southwest, and it had BBC out the front, and I'm like, wow, this is like proper, and I'm going into it and all the rest of it. It was just a fun question. She sat in a studio and she's doing a live broadcast as I'm getting some B-roll, and recording while she's doing a live broadcast, and there's all these buttons everywhere, and for me as a techie, I love all the buttons, but what I was terrified about was the notion that in between every record and every whatever, you gotta say something. Do you ever sort of sit there in your radio studio or when you're on television and think, I've gone blank, I don't know what to say?
Well, in the early days, 100% that was what the worry was. And my heart would be like pounding out of my chest. I remember the very first show I did. At the end of every link, so in other words, every speaking bit, I kind of fall back into my chair and go, I got through it. And, after that first show, it was like I'd been in a car crash. It was that much adrenaline.
I bet.
But now I've done at least 4,500 shows.
Not many then.
So that's that is quite a long time on air. And I think the main worry I have, and it happens when I get into the studio. So now, I go on air at 6 a.m.
Wow.
And I always say to my beloved producer, friend Celia, I say to her, Celia, I've got nothing to say. I've just got nothing to give. But then the red light goes on, you turn the microphone on and suddenly
Boom.
It just has to happen. And that is called adrenaline. It's there for a reason, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it just somehow happens. And when you've done it for a long, long time, it becomes less of a deal. It does.
Thank you. It's good to know. In my amateurish way of doing this.
And I should say also, sorry, Chris, that makes it sound like I just go in with nothing in my head. A lot of the show I have produced, I've produced it. I've set up guests and I've, researched and hopefully, served up some good material. But it's the other bits. It's like all the bits in between the songs that haven't got produced content. It's those bits that you need to sort of really find something to bring. Yeah, totally.
And that's what I was really referring to, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, I should mention also that you are a priest now in the Church of England, and it is your God story, which includes all of the BBC, that we are hoping to record now and offer to everyone. So I like to context things, just to sort of like go through the whole thing. Where were you born?
Sheffield, and I moved down to Devon 2 years later as a toddler, and I stayed in Devon for my sort of youth and childhood, but then moved to the Midlands and East Midlands, and I've lived in the East Midlands for the longest.
Oh, right.
I say that because I'm quite loyal to my listeners who know me through Radio Nottingham for the last 20 years. Yeah, so, but I grew up in the Southwest.
So what was your childhood like then in the Southwest? You're there when you're 2 years old. Was it around Plymouth?
Yeah, my mum was a dentist and a very busy woman, and we lived above the dental practice for a while. And then to get away from work, we moved out to the middle of Dartmoor.
Oh, wow.
Which for an adult is great, but when you're 13,
oh yeah, I guess yeah.
it was quite difficult to know that the nearest bus stop was a 2-mile walk away.
Wow.
And we travelled in to school still, to the same school, but I wasn't a happy kid, and I wasn't all that happy at home. And there's a lot of stuff that I can't really go into now. But I think it's fair to say that I left home in a hurry at 18, and I didn't have much confidence. I had a lot of issues, I think, around how I felt about myself. Didn't feel very loved, although I'm sure, my mum worked so very hard, and I'm sure my dad now would say that we were, but we were parented in a particular way that suited a particular generation. And it was very much, I would say, the stick, not the carrot, in how we were raised. And myself and my sister, we kind of pushed back quite a lot against that, and it got a bit chaotic. And yeah, it wasn't a happy time.
Okay.
So I left as soon as I could, and I moved. Instead of going straight to university, I had a year out. And I just joined a church at that point, but I wasn't raised as a churchgoer.
So faith didn't feature at all?
No. In fact, the only time my mum and dad took me to church was when I was christened. But I was christened, and my mum was a believer, definitely, and so was her mum. But going to church was not a thing, and my dad is a very committed atheist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to know his mind now. I really would. So you had that sort of experience, and if you don't mind me saying, you did describe it as leaving you with questions about self-worth and confidence. And it's interesting, really, because I don't know if it's something you've almost sort of journeyed so far in that it's either reversed now or whether you still have those issues, but you seem such a confident person now, ebullient, as it were, like full of energy and full of charisma, as it were. That the idea, no, genuinely, and I mean that sincerely.
You're embarrassing me,
right? But it's the idea of you. But maybe that is the consequence of someone at that tender age feeling the way you did. That it's something you journey with, and then you end up where you are now.
Do you know? I think there is a lot when you look at performers and you look at comics and you look at those that are on the stage. So many have the story of just needing to be seen and to be someone say, "Hey, you're good, you're great. We like you, we love you." And sadly, for so many, including me, I think, that is a driving force that makes you want to do better and better, because you haven't got that foundation inside that says, just as you are worth it. So you're always having to feel like you deserve what you have, or, you have to kind of earn your significance. So I didn't leave home with a sense that I, in myself, had any significance. And I think for a long time, I've been trying to sort of earn it, prove it. And I know I'm not alone in that. But I think when I did find a faith in God, in following Jesus, so much of that was just blown out of the water in such an amazing way that I was taken above. It's like I was completely taken above all of that and all the feeling of constriction and worry and fear and doubt. And I was about 16 when it happened. And it's a hard thing to describe because I had no language for it at the time. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was, and I look back at my diary at that time, and I just used to write things like, "I am on another high." And because, I'd sort of gone to a service and God was there, although I didn't know that's what it was. And suddenly it's like like life would flow in and the future felt like it was full of possibility, not dread. Those feelings sort of eventually did subside. But I guess now I would call it an experience of the Holy Spirit. And I think I was ready at that age. I was ready to be told that there was a God who did love me. There is a Father who loves you. And that you don't have to earn his approval. All of that was just music to my ears. And I sort of believed it for a while, but when you're wired in a different way, it takes a long time to untrain those old thought processes. And so I would say the journey through all of that isn't over, and it maybe won't even ever be, this side of heaven. But for me, that is a key theme into how I came to faith, I think.
So do you mind if we just for a few moments major on that time when because you very kindly sent me some notes actually, and you said that at the age of 16 you went to St Jude's in Plymouth where this awakening, this meeting of God sort of occurred. But you also said just now that you left home at 18, so there was an overlap here of like what you very kindly shared with us in terms of your upbringing and what was going on in your heart. What was, I kind of almost want to say, so how did you even get to the church to start with? Did a friend invite you? And like what? And alongside that, it was like, when did you start to sort of think, oh gosh, I'm encountering something here which I'm going to call God? What was that like?
Yeah, well, I made some friends at school. My two closest friends happened to be Christians, and they invited me to the Christian Union. Now, I think today that's a bold ask, isn't it? Come and sit in a small room at lunchtime, sit with some geeky people and talk about God. I said yes, Chris. So, that hugely encourages me now to think, you never know, invite people, but probably don't make the CU as boring as it was at times when I went. And I say that because I used to take a turn leading it. So the CU. So I did go along because I believed in God.
So even though your parents didn't, you had an
No, my
openness?
mum did, and my gran did, and then I had a school teacher who did. Mrs. Merrin, I don't think she's still alive. Second year juniors.
In case you are.
Yeah. And so for me, the God thing sort of made sense. And then I did sciences at school because I did want to be a doctor. And genuinely studying science led me closer to believing that, this is incredible. How these molecules fit together. How I just can't believe people don't believe there is something beyond random coincidence that brought all this to be. So I became absolutely convinced that God was real. So therefore, when I was told, well, if you believe in God and if you believe in Jesus, He invites you to follow Him. I suppose I just thought, well, it would be rude not to. That's kind of how it went. It's like, okay. And it wasn't overnight. I think it just sort of genuinely, unfolded. And then I love song worship, and I'm a musician, and I love to lead worship. Yeah, really big part of my life. And I think because that is how I first encountered what a worshipping community was like, or church. I didn't go to church because I couldn't get to one, age 16. But I used to get picked up to be taken to a midweek sort of sing-along that was a practice for a kind of cross Plymouth church event. Details, but really it was just it was a practice for this big worship knees up. So I used to get in the car with someone and they'd take me along, and I would just sing these songs with words about God. And that was when this sort of amazing sense of, wow, God is real, and that was it. I think that was the Holy Spirit. And then I learned to drive, and then I went to the church of my friends.
Well, if you're living in the middle of Dartmoor, you need to learn to drive.
Yeah.
So explain for our viewers what that sense was, what that feeling was like.
Oh, Chris. It was. Someone said the other day, and I think this is it for me too. I think it was a bit like before. It's easy to see religion, and I don't like the term religion, but you know what I mean, as like this small thing you have to be confined by, like looking at a TARDIS from the outside.
Bunch of rules.
Exactly. And then through the worship and through the music and through singing about what God was like, it's like you go inside it, and then suddenly, the world is massive. The future is infinite. The feeling of sort of lightness and being free from all the immediate worries. I was worried about exams. I was worried about home, what was going on, all sorts of things. But suddenly, in those moments, it all lifted off, and it was like a portal into something eternal. That's all I can describe it as being. And emotionally, it sort of lifted me up. I felt a bit like a high. I hadn't done drugs. I imagine it was like a high, So that was it. It was a very sort of immediate emotional response to what was going on. And then the brain sort of caught up with it as I went along, and as I learnt more about what God was, who Jesus was, etc.
Gotcha. So there was the sort of the spiritual experience. There was the being enveloped by it all, and then you started to study the theology and the doctrine and other such things, such that you actually went to theological college.
Yeah, that's where I did my first degree. I did want to be a doctor, but I was so overtaken by this, call it a conversion experience, that I misunderstood, I think, how God sees our lives. I thought being all in for God must involve doing some sort of full-time Christian work.
Right.
And this, I still have a bee in my bonnet about this. That is because back in the day, and we're talking late 80s now, in church services, the people who you would pray for would be the ones who were about to go off and get ordained, or the people who were going to go and do some overseas mission. They were the ones that were modelling the super discipleship life. But for me, I thought, I sort of want to be a doctor, but actually maybe, no, I want to go all out for God. So I'll go and give my life to doing full-time Christian work, which now is nuts. It's so nuts. And it turns out that after I'd done my degree, there aren't a lot of jobs for someone who's just got a degree in theology that wants to save the world. Like what? So sure, I should have just, anyway, you get it. So now I really, really champion people embracing their everyday sort of locations in their office, at home, or wherever they are. I mean, it's now thankfully a very common
I'm glad you said this. We need to hear this.
Yeah.
Within the Anglican community, within church, basically, we need to hear that actually those in ministry, those who are working for God, those who are all in for God, aren't just those who wear a collar or have got some licensed lay minister or anything like that. You can be a doctor, you can be a bus driver, you can be an electrician, you can be anything, but you're living your life fully for God in that role. And sometimes, because of the opportunities that your profession gives you, it's actually more powerful than being, a collared person and other such stuff. So it's like there's a person who's part of God Stories Today. He's a digital evangelist storyteller. He's called Dr. Jeff Stevenson. He's a consultant palliative care doctor. He's now actually going forward for ordination, but the decades of work he's done as a palliative care consultant, most certainly he sees as him being all in for God and working for God all the time. So I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
However, bless your heart, in your notes you did say in your first year of college your inner mess, I'm reading your words, so your inner mess surfaced and I dived into 2 years of deep depression. I couldn't sense God and felt he had abandoned me. I was looking for an immediate healing charismatic experience. It never came. Several years away from God, ended up doing a postgrad in broadcast journalism, and that's how I got into media. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but obviously the glaring question is what happened that dived you into whatever the word is, depression. Well,
becoming a Christian for me was quite emotional, and I did feel that God was real, but it wasn't an overnight fix for all the stuff that had gone on as a kid, and how I felt about myself. And I joined the church at a time where there was a lot of, let's call it charismatic, sort of renewal, excitement. And I was surrounded by people who were having these amazing experiences of God, genuinely. I mean, I'm not knocking their experiences, but for some reason, apart from that first feeling that we talked about like being taken out of myself, take me to a meeting, the person at the front invites you, to stand up, see what God does. The room will be doing carpet time on the floor. I am the one left standing up, yeah, exactly. So, if there is another move of God like that, I need to be the one that's walking in with the trays of drinks at that moment, because I will still be rock solid as the rest of the congregation is on their faces. But I was looking for that sort of thing, because that was what tended to happen. It was in all the Christian paperback books that I was reading. Floyd McClung, The Father Heart of God. Remember that one? Brilliant, lovely book about God's love just rushing in and just healing a lifetime of hurts. So really, I was expecting that. It never really did happen. and I didn't have the wisdom to bring and the perspective to bring to it. And then the depression sort of enveloped me, and I would spend night after night, up in the chapel, the Oak Chapel at Trinity College, just saying, God, where are you? Where have you gone? I need you to help me. And I didn't get one of those experiences I thought should happen. So naive, I realise how this sounds, but it just all added to the rejection rather than helping me see beyond it. And I didn't cope well with it. I was quite vulnerable and got into a very unhelpful relationship. And it was just easier once I'd left college, not finding that perfect Christian job. I sort of ended up not going back to church ever so quickly. And because I wasn't having to wrestle with all of this, why me, why not me, where is God? It kind of went on the back burner.
Okay.
And eventually I came through the depression, but I just put it all on the back burner.
So here you are, bless your heart, you've had the childhood experience you've had, which has led you to have these thoughts and feelings about self-confidence and self-worth. You've had an experience of God in the Southwest, but then you're waiting for this should we say, all-encompassing healing that kind of like, reverses all that, well, in that sort of way, or heals it. And it kind of doesn't. Why do you think God, over that 2-year period, didn't make it? Because I'm pretty sure he was there.
Yeah.
But why do you think he sort of allowed that to happen? Or are you still wrestling with that?
I think that is a question I will ask, but when I get to heaven. But I think I did survive it. And I think you have to develop a more broad understanding of who God is and how God interacts with us. And the mistake is, I think, seeing God as this almost like a fairy godmother figure or a Father Christmas. That's how, as kids, we sort of grow up imagining God's like that. God's there to make our life happy, and, he gives us his goodies along the way. Yes, sometimes he does. But that isn't why we worship him and give our lives to following Jesus. I think it's more because of who he is. And by hook or by crook, over these years, I've had to really push deeper into who God is in himself rather than what God does for me. Some people have amazing stories of what God does for them, and I've got amazing stories of what God's done for me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But looking back, I think he had provided me with things, but they just didn't look like the things I was hoping for. So I was wanting an individual encounter, in a worship meeting, let's say, where I would feel this, I don't know, electricity and angels and trumpets, and I'd suddenly be healed. What he did was he put amazing people around me, people of God, people who loved me. The church back in Plymouth, they were brilliant. A couple that took me into their home for 9 months and still today, send me birthday presents, and, this was God's love. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. Okay. But I wasn't in a place where I could receive that as God's love. That was nice, but now, God, will you please love me? I separated it all out unhelpfully, and I was just looking for it in different places. So I think it was there, I just couldn't quite.
So you were looking for one thing, and I think justifiably so. Because
of the narrative, I think, that I'd really got excited by at the time, which was God's breaking in, it's all supernatural, which he does, he does. And I was so desperate to experience that for myself. I was fixed on that, and I didn't really see all of that amazing Christian community and church around me that is designed to be a healing presence. It's a joy that we get to be used by God to heal each other's hurts. It's not all just a vertical thing. There's a whole body horizontal thing.
Layered thing going on. So that he was there. Now you can see you in hindsight and providing things, but just not in the way that you at the time would have liked. But it's the way God's deciding to do it because he is God. But you know what I find really interesting amongst all this, though, is that in our preamble before the interview, but also in the interview, you've touched on the notion of you wanting to be loved and valued for who you are. And then you've also said you started to learn that there's something about loving God for who he is rather than just what he does for you as well. And I find that interesting. I'm not quite sure what's leading up to, but I find that profound. I really do. I really find that profound. Bless your heart. You've been really honest in the notes that you sent through to me, because you said in 2003, and I say this with love in my heart and delicacy, your mother.
Yeah.
She went to heaven age 59 and it brought you back to God in prayer. You'd missed him.
Yes. Yeah. It's a huge regret of mine that it took her, that I didn't come to her and I wasn't able to minister to her, if you like, as the Christian I sort of became. Because at the time I was very much not living that life. But yeah, she fell ill just after I got married when I was 30, and she'd just retired. Classic, you hear it so often, don't you?
You do actually, yeah.
Yeah, and got cancer of the pancreas, had a big operation, but never left hospital, and was there for 8 months. And she did come home because we had, bless them, Macmillan nurses are amazing, and helped her to come home so she could die. And I was there, by the bed, didn't leave it, wanted to be there for the moment. And of course I prayed during that time. Of course I did. And again, no major miracles. However, I did feel that God was present. And things had happened in her journey too, where the chaplain had come to visit her, and things that they'd said had meant something to her. And I remember she had the lyrics to this song called "Be Still for the Presence of the Lord" by her bed, and when I came in, she just wanted to show me them, and I just didn't know what to say. I just looked at them and went, oh. I mean, now I'd have a great conversation with her about it all, and hopefully pray with her and do all of that. But no, I just sort of looked at it and just held on to it as a bit of hope that her journey was coming to completion. And yeah.
So you were there literally when she passed?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, tough times. I feel it even more now, I think. Now I've got my own daughter, because she's not there for all those key times. And
right.
Yeah, it's a shame. It is a shame.
So it brought you back to God.
Yeah.
Now that your mum's in heaven, and it brought you back to God, which is wonderful. But then you said in 2008, and you can talk about this as much or as little as you like.
Yeah.
You were still struggling to relate to God as Father. That was a big thing for me, actually. God as Father, it's like, yeah, no one's my father, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Because I had an issue. But you went to a New Wine Leaders Conference where you were prayed for and you experienced a bit of healing. Do you want to talk about that? You don't have to if you do, but one question that comes to my mind is, what did it feel like when it was actually happening? Because there's video footage of it.
Yeah.
And that's all I really want to ask. Really.
Yeah,
what did it feel like?
Yes, well, I do want to talk about it, because it has been one of those moments that people want to hear about a lot.
Well, you can see it happening.
Yeah. So I joined a church. I suppose my Christian journey part 2 began not long after Mum died. So 2004 in Nottingham, and really I'd started again at that point. And wonderful Christian friends who are very experienced in counselling and taught me through a lot of stuff. And I realised, I've got issues. And I just couldn't seem to really believe that God's love was all-encompassing, unconditional, and that I didn't have to somehow impress him. And I was aware that this was driving me to work very hard all the time still. If it wasn't for people's approval, it was for God's approval. So I knew that was unhealthy, but I just couldn't seem to get over this. So I knew there was this conference coming up, and I made a massive sacrifice, Chris. I was so keen to do business with God at this conference. I gave up alcohol for a month running up to it.
Did you really? I've got it on camera.
I was like, come on, God. So it was like I basically fasted and I prayed and said, you've got to meet me at this conference. I really did. I was wrestling with him, and I'll do anything. And so we got to this conference, and Mark Marks, who founded a movement called Healing on the Streets, was one of the speakers, and we went into this seminar, and it was about healing, and he just gave a talk about what he was doing. It was amazing, amazing testimonies, and how God was very present and powerful in the encounters that he was having. And he said, right, now I'm going to demonstrate, and there's someone here who's got one leg, and it's the classic, one leg shorter than the other. So I'm laughing because I've just finished reading again Adrian Plass, which is a comedy book from the 80s, very funny, where the classic one leg longer than the other scenario is mentioned and chuckled at. But for me, I genuinely had an accident skiing as a child, and one leg was about that much shorter than the other. Mm-hmm. And I had to wear an insert in my shoe to level off the legs so that I didn't walk funny and it didn't make my back hurt. So he said, is there anyone here? There's someone here that wears a block thing in their shoe, and they need to come out to the front right now. So that was awkward. Went forward, sat down in front of all these hundreds of people, and he said, he just sat down, he sat me down and he said, Father God, show Fran how much you love her. And then basically just watched as, and people got their mobile phones out to film, as my leg kind of grew.
You literally can see this. I don't know if I'm allowed to give the link on the thing, but you literally can see it getting bigger. And I can't imagine how you could have, like, shifted your hips or something to sort of make it look
No, I didn't.
non-real.
I honestly didn't. And I also had motorbike boots on at the time. And so my feet were on his hands, and it wasn't like I could sort of, though he was pulling the boot off, because they're molded around your legs, and that's how they work. And so it was pretty awesome. And one of the videos was posted, and they got something like 100,000 hits. And I was invited to go and speak about this event all over. I was even on Radio 4 but talking about it on the Sunday programme, because it's a bit weird. But for me, it wasn't that the leg thing had happened. It was obviously that I'd asked God, that Mark had said those words, show Fran that you love her, that this thing had happened. And it was like being back to square one, floating on cloud nine, just thinking, really? So that was a powerful kind of encounter moment, and it led to us as a church really exploring more seriously, the fact that God is healing, and he does it still today. And we set up a kind of Healing on the Streets thing in Nottingham, offering to pray with people, and we did see some stuff happen. A lot of people we didn't see things happen to, but it was a really exciting time. A key moment.
In relation to your God story, though, may I ask if you now believe God loves you?
Yes.
And is your father?
I do. But what I've had to do is really tackle it from a biblical and theological, logical point of view, to train myself into those thoughts. And I believe it for absolutely every human. And so why would I be so special that I'd be the one exception? I mean, that's weird, isn't it? Yeah, of all the billions of people on the planet, I believe God loves them. I'm just that one who's extra specially weird. So it's not so much now, it's not so much the fact of it. I think I know I've still got a little bit still to do when it comes to feeling like he loves me as much when I'm asleep and doing absolutely nothing, and vegging out watching telly, as when I'm up the front preaching a talk where people are crying, and not that happens much, but do you know what I mean, where you're not just smashing it out the park for God. I think he's pleased with us, but he's more pleased with who he's created us to be, and how we grow, and how we move more deeply into an awareness of who we are, who he is. That's what really delights him, I think, in us finding freedom to be who he's made us to be. loving him, plugged into him, than what we're achieving, who thinks we're good, etc., etc.
Otherwise, it's faith by works, and we nullify the cross.
100%. I see so many people, particularly with how our culture is very much based on how we appear, how we are judged. I see so many people who are struggling to like themselves. And I think when you're then talking about a God who knows your very thoughts, who sees you, for some people actually that's the last thing they feel they want. And that is something that, you know, I've had to battle with. Why would you want to bring yourself before God for him to look at all that stuff that you hate and then think, oh, he really loves me? And I do hope that in the next few years, for me, there's going to be some sort of opportunity to get alongside, particularly young women, folks that have got this stuff that they're dealing with, to try to accompany them into the presence of God who accepts them absolutely as they are, and to try somehow to break that cycle, because it can be so toxic, and it's a really difficult one. But it's that kind of image of God and religion that I think is a huge hurdle for people to want to follow Jesus, because it's, you need to be like this, you need to do that, and it's a trap. It's a really difficult trap.
I within the church have helped people explore their vocations many times. I had a role within the church, DDO, where I help people discern ordination and lay ministry and all that kind of stuff. And often it was when you met someone who was at the beginning of their journey, I've got this crazy stirring in my heart, but I know it can't really be true because I'm just not good enough.
Yeah.
I'm not holy enough, and they think all people with ministries and so forth are shinier than shinier. Not the truth.
Oh, 100%.
Not the truth.
God, where do we start?
Not the truth.
Yes.
And I think there's something, when you said what you said about wanting to sort of explore that realm of conversation, and I hope it might help a lot of people who are going through this sort of thing, because I've had it, you're very kindly sharing it with us now. It really struck a chord with me. It really did. So I'm going to think about that, but I would want you to really feel encouraged now that I feel like there was something in me, as you said, that wants me to sort of say, please go do.
Yeah.
And I'll be in conversation with you as well, but about this, because I just think that it's it can be like an all-encompassing thing, but equally we can just get plagued with the small things that equally nonetheless affect our lives. Because me doing this ministry, I sit in front of the camera sometimes and I think I'm aware of how I look more than I've ever done, and it's just why can I not look like a Hollywood something, I'm just a crummy South London lad, and it's and I'm aware as well, if I'm going to be honest, I look at it and I was a bit chubby then, or I was slimmer then, and I realised how much my weight yo-yos by doing this, and I think, get over it. But that's just a mild thing of what we're talking about, which is a very deep thing.
No, absolutely, and it is about what is your currency?
Yeah.
I think I've had to really think about that. What's your currency as a human? And people find it in different ways, don't they? But ultimately, you cannot, obviously we would believe that you can't separate your currency or your value, your usefulness from the fact that you are made by God to be loved by him and to love him back. And anything else, it's just a side hustle that's essentially fruitless, because what does it lead to? Well, it just leads to you wanting more of that stuff, to help feel that you're adding to your currency. That's not to say that God doesn't have amazing ideas for our lives and looks forward to seeing how we might, adventure into these areas that might bring some fruit, might introduce people to him, might add to other people's lives. That's great, but without that core, which is, I'm held as a child of God. The end. I just don't know how some people cope, and I don't know how people with a childhood that is dysfunctional and without foundations of who they are, I wouldn't have coped. I don't think, I've been to very dark places, and I am alive now thanks to this amazing God who has unconditional love and who who gives a hope that is entirely unrelated to anything we do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all about what he has done. It's entirely unrelated to my performance. He's done it, you know. So if that's not hope and that's not freeing, but I mean, there's nothing else really I can imagine that could have got me through the ways of thinking and the sort of deep and dark zones that I'd been in to bring me out the other side.
In 2009, you had a major motorbike crash. I just want to sort of touch on that before we get onto your media career and sort of bring you to where we are now, because I'm aware of time. Would you believe it's just like moving on?
Okay.
But like, if you can actually go online and look at the pictures of Fran when she had this motorbike crash, and it's almost like your face was hanging off. Right? It's just like, it was like scars everywhere, and your nose was really badly affected, and all the rest of it. Like, you know, but you say in the notes that you gave to me, wasn't traumatized. I guess you mean like emotionally and stuff, wasn't true, knew God to be incredibly real, and you said felt peaceful in the presence of God as I lay on the road surrounded by paramedics and a fire crew. So you've had this really mighty crash and yet you feel at peace.
Yes.
What's that about?
Well, that was a major moment. I was setting off from some traffic lights. So I wasn't driving like a lunatic or anything like that, or riding like a lunatic. I was just setting off from some traffic lights, and a car did an illegal manoeuvre, did a turn where they shouldn't have. It obscured the view of another, and long story short, I just went straight into this Mercedes. And then the back, I should say before I go on, I do talk graphically about this, but because I wasn't traumatised by it, I can say it and it doesn't affect me. But I am aware that other people, so I'm going to say something.
Put your dinner down there, all right?
Yeah, so sorry. So I will just say that the car car literally went over my head.
The car went over your head?
The car back tyre, wheel of the car mounted my head, broke my helmet like an egg. And I've still got it actually, the helmet. I keep it as an, you know, an aide memoir of how I should really be dead, and it broke the visor, the perspex visor of the helmet, which then is the thing that cut my nose off.
Wow!
And it the weight of the car broke my eye socket, my cheekbone, my nose, and you know my nose was not looking good. I know it is horrible, but I don't remember it happening.
Thank goodness.
So there's something the brain does to protect us, I think, from traumatic events sometimes. And I don't remember it happening, but I do remember just coming round in the road and seeing this face leaning over me, saying stuff. And then I think I passed in and out of consciousness. And I do remember when I gained enough consciousness to process what was going on, was that I just said, "Oh, hello, God. You know, are you?" I just chatting to God, like he was very, very near me, and I just did not feel any fear.
Really?
I didn't feel, oh heck, what's happened? Oh no, oh my face. I mean, my face really hurt, but I just knew in that moment that God was real, that I didn't have to fear anything, whether I was going to die or live. Honestly, in that moment and since, it didn't seem to matter. It's not I didn't care, but for me looking back, it was one of those big reveal moments where you think, the faith and the relationship that I have with this God, who some might think is an imaginary friend, is so real that when the proverbial hits the fan, when the woman hits the road, it's so real that it carries you through these horrific traumas, and he's just, the truth and the reality of it permeates everything. And so I don't have any sort of flashback worries. I've been riding a motorbike since. I recovered. And then wonderfully, I can see how God was all over that scene, because the first person to find me in the road I think was a Christian. The paramedic that arrived was someone I knew from another church. The police officer that arrived first on the scene was a friend of another, church mate. And then when I got to hospital, my consultant surgeon was a Christian that went to another Baptist church. Not that it matters that they're Christians, but looking back, I was like, oh, God just brought the family to that event, and I felt just completely safe and fear-free.
That's amazing. So you're lying on the road, you've had this horrendous experience, which thankfully you can't remember now, but you felt the presence of God so much that you almost felt like you're having a chit-chat with him whilst you're lying on the road.
That sort of thing. I mean, I wouldn't say, yeah. I was just, in other words, when I regained consciousness, I just said to God, oh, hello. I wish I'd said something else and I could tell a better story. But it was literally like, oh, God.
So I find it interesting that your first impression was not, ouch, or, oh, there's a paramedic. It's, God's here.
Yeah, pretty much.
That I just find amazing.
Yeah.
Utterly amazing.
Yeah, and he didn't say anything, but I just felt at peace and at rest with him there in the road. And I think what's interesting is my sense of his reality was greater than my fear that I might die.
Really?
And I think that has continued in my life. And I think that is the Christian hope, is it not?
Yes.
And I think that is what I would say ongoing, that when you have a relationship with the one who holds absolutely everything in his hands, who could just snuff it out at any moment, and is infinite, and died, for us to know him. Stuff we hear a lot, but when you have a relationship with that God, that who he is the trump card. Is the trump card to anything that might go wrong in our lives, that any danger that might happen, any illness we might have, any career failure, any bereavement. And it's in those moments that we can genuinely lean in to the God who is eternal, who says, I am. And that, I think, is probably the biggest revelation and the biggest joy that I'm increasingly discovering. Mm-hmm. And that moment lying in the road, I guess, was it sort of crystallised and clear.
You then, it says here in your notes, you start talking about your media career, which I'm absolutely fascinated about. And I almost want to do a part 2 at some stage of you, and just sort of talk about what it is to be a Christian in this sort of like world of media that you reside in. But you say here that you entered that year's Radio Academy Awards. You say it's like an Oscars for radio, and you submitted a radio content or some content themed around your crash, and it won a gold award for best speech broadcaster. Oh, you did. And it got you attention from some various people, as it were, and then your media career really started to sort of like take off, as it were, from that point onwards. Would that be right?
Yes, I guess so. It certainly helped. There'd been a little bit of interest from 5 Live before that all of that happened, but when you win a Radio Academy Award, especially for speech, it was for speech broadcaster. So I was up against Eddie Mair. And all these sort of big hitters on national radio, and I was elated to have been nominated, and I went to the award ceremony just half embarrassed to be there, thinking this is not for people like me. And Chris Evans is up there hosting, and then comes the award, and I won it, which was amazing. In fact, someone approached me at another new wine a few years on, and said he had a prophecy for me, and he said, there's a surprise in your life coming. And I think almost it was kind of foretold that all of this stuff was going to start unfolding. So that was nice. So I got an agent at that point, and got lots more shows on 5 Live, a few opportunities at Radio 2 as well. Mm-hmm. So really thankful to God for that. Yeah, really.
Before
blessed.
I ask you a theological question about that, can I just be a bit of a nerd and just ask you, who's the most famous person you've ever met?
Oh, goodness. What's most famous? I think one of the most precious times that I will always cherish is going down to meet Michael Parkinson and spending a whole morning with him, with me interviewing him, and I made a TV show out of it, and that was amazing.
I bet.
I mean, can you imagine how tense I was? Can you imagine how much preparation?
The master.
I know. Like, sometimes you think, oh, just read a little biog on Wikipedia and we'll kind of freeform jazz it. Not with him. I'd like read everything about it. I'd made copious notes, and I was rigid with tension. I can see it in my face, when I look back at that programme. But he was lovely and told me some great stories off air and on air, and that felt lovely. But just the first few times I went to Radio 2, I'd interviewed Terry Wogan back in the day, and if you're in radio, he's just a legend. And the show I was presenting was the studio that Terry used to use, and just sitting in his chair,
hallowed ground.
That was fab. Just praying that some of it would just rub off, off the chair into me. So that was good. So yeah, there've been lots. The thing is, I when you interview a lot of people, like for instance in Nottingham, if the theatre's got shows on with celebrities in, they'd all come into the local radio stations, and you'd interview them, as a matter of course. So loads of names, but always the Strictly people are lovely.
Oh, right.
To do.
Well, Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah, love that. Anton de Beck, lovely. In fact, I co-hosted a show with him, and he waltzed me across the stage. That was nice. So I mean, that was a while ago now. Doesn't happen so much these days, but yeah.
Is there a job or something within the media world that you'd really love to do? Is there the thing? If you could write your own ticket.
I just like. I love to chat, and I love people. So something like hosting the One Show type magazine. I was
just sitting here thinking you need to do the One Show.
I love that. I don't think that's going to happen, sadly, now. And then
do the One Show, people.
Come on. And then just larking about, having fun, but being interested in people and letting them tell their stories. Who wouldn't want to do that? And radio-wise, just, again, very similar, just interviews, people, but also having fun, not too serious. I don't think I could be one of your Radio 4 PM or Today presenters. That requires much too much good behaviour. I always had to mess about, and yeah.
Maybe there's something you can, pioneer. You can sort of start or something, because I was literally sitting here and thinking you need to do the One Show, and then funny enough you say that. So we'll just wait and see. You say you might not, but wait and see.
Yeah.
How do you sort of it's kind of the question I want to ask you, it's something along the lines of how do you navigate your Christian faith with being a presenter at the same time? And you can answer that in any way, but it's kind of like there's opportunities, I guess, that you might want to sort of say, I major on that as I answer Chris's question. There's also areas of conflict, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, or challenge that you might want to sort of say, well, maybe I have to watch that. But equally, if I'm thinking about like a nurse, just to sort of open up the question a bit more, they can't pray with people, that sort of stuff, as far as I'm aware. So how do you navigate being a Christian and an ordained Christian?
Yeah. Well, I think being a Christian is no different to any other profession. I wouldn't have thought, in that we are in control of what we say, aren't we? Of how you interact with colleagues, and for all of the bad press that big sections of the media get, I've been fortunate to be in environments which have been very positive and very easy to be a person of faith in.
Right.
However, there are certain sort of cultures that pop up in every workplace where, sometimes you have a season of everyone's grumpy and everyone's negative about everything, and you've sometimes just got to make some decisions about whether you're going to join in with that or whether you're going to be a bit more positive. But in terms of being on air, of course, I would never go on air with my objective to try to convert people or bang that drum. No one wants to hear that. It never works anyway. And but what I used to do quite regularly as a producer and presenter would be make sure I invite plenty of the good talkers among the Christians that I knew onto the shows. Right. So they would just be there, just happen to be Christians, but engaging in the on-air conversation about stuff. So for a long time, that was how I would sort of try and bring a bit of faith into work. But then when I started to present a show again, which has a faith brief, then of course you've got permission to bring that into the content. Being ordained, it's dead easy because people expect it. But I don't, still there's no place for just trying to convince people of a particular position. For me, it's about getting people's stories heard, a bit like you're doing now. So that's what I love, just giving someone the opportunity to tell a story. Experiences, I think, are so interesting to people, more than opinions. So stories trump opinions all day long.
Amen.
So if you've got a great story and you're in Nottinghamshire, come and see me, because you'll help
Email at the bottom.
You'll film my show and save me a load of time. Yeah, no, but genuinely, really, that is such a privilege. For me, it's about just translating something that probably seems a bit weird and mythical and very marginal and fringy, and just normalising it.
Cool.
Because there are so many Christians, there are so many people that have some kind of a faith, and yet, when you look at media, when you look at TV dramas, when you look at everything, you'd think it was 1 in a billion, and they're all freaky weirdos. So I hope, if anything, all I do is just make it normal. And
coming into land almost, because we are running out of time. How did the calling to ordination come about? Because here you are now, you're actually ordained in the Church of England. How did that come about?
I think there's always been a little undercurrent of thinking, could this be me?
From when?
Probably from when I went to theological college the first time round. My first degree was among people that were going to be training for ordination. But clearly my life was very chaotic. And once I got hold of this thing where I was so keen to encourage others to live out their Christian lives in their workplaces and not see full-time Christian work, as the only way to spend your life on God, I didn't really see that it was necessary, and I felt like I was probably going to let the side down a bit. But it was just a general sort of sense, and I had a natural crossroads where I was just thinking, what's next? And then it was one of those freaky things where someone said, "Oh, have you thought of ordination?" And then I thought, well, obviously not. Next. Then someone else said, "Have you thought of ordination?" And after the third one, I said, "God, if that's you, I just need to hear this a little bit more." Fourth, fifth and sixth person said it. At that point, I was beginning to sweat a bit and think, okay, maybe I need to think about this. And then just a few sort of things happened that were, again, a bit of a nudge from God. And for that, I will just tell you the clincher. What?
So I just not knocking. I mean, it was the beginning to sweat a bit. I think they really got me.
And so then I didn't have a great experience, by the way, when I applied. I really did a terrible interview.
Oh, when you started answering after all the mock
when I was I got through the local selection procedure, but when it came to the national, it's like, well, you know what it's like. You sit in front of these people and they interview you and they want to know that you're not all sorts of things and you are others. And I just messed all that up really badly. So it was a big fat no.
No, the first time around?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I was in a bit of a state, and I just laid down this crazy idea with God. I was out in the fields behind the house, just crying, just thinking, I don't know what to do. And I said, if you want me to be ordained, I want you to get this friend of mine, I'll mention his name, Dowie, lovely guy. Dowie needs to send me a text. And I hadn't spoken to Dowie for 3 years. So Dowie needs to send me a text and then I'll really know. So went to bed. Next morning the alarm goes off to wake me up on my phone and I pick the phone up. Guess who's just texted me? It's Dowie. The Lord has asked me to send you this text. And it was from 2 Samuel, I think 22, where it goes... with my God, I can advance against a troop. I can climb a wall. It was those sorts of verses. So that was a bit of a dun, dun, dun. And here I am.
And what I just love as well is that, Fran is a priest in the Church of England, without needing to be like full-time in a parish somewhere. You're full-time, obviously. Well, you work for the BBC. That's what you do.
2 days a week.
2 days a week.
Yeah.
And you give some time to the
I'm
priest.
a curate. Yeah. Still doing a curacy.
So it can sort of like manifest itself on the ground in many, many forms, which is really, really super cool. One more question, if I may.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go into the fun spotlight sort of like quiz thing at the end. It's very important. It's very serious. Okay, you've got to be switched on.
It's the best bit.
Right, okay. Try and get this into one question because I'd love you to cover it. It's something along the lines of, who is God to you now?
Yeah. Oh gosh, you are so tough with your questions. Who is God? Well, do you know, I've moved probably from thinking of God as more a big, powerful, judgy force, and the Father that I really should be able to know better, to really enjoying him as Father, Spirit and Son. Jesus has become more and more and more real to me in the last 20 years. Before, I think because I was fixed on the Father thing and really trying to get hold of it and battling over why it wasn't working so well for me, I think Jesus was a bit of a sideshow almost. But now, I think I feel more acquainted with the humanity of God, if that makes sense. I know that sounds like an oxymoron if you're not familiar with faith, but, God coming to be human, God making himself vulnerable, God allowing himself to be broken, God stepping into mess, and God using all of the weapons, if you like, of destruction and turning all of the stuff that humanity can use for bad, using that very stuff as the vehicle of our salvation and as the vehicle of demonstrating his love and disarming all of that. That is awesome. And that, I think, I come back to time and time again as the thing that you can wonder at. Jesus as someone who is so approachable and yet so majestic and so still elusive, Chris. It's like you feel like you're getting there, don't you? And then so elusive again. And that is a wonderful thing. And that's what I've really loved about going back to theological college. Sometimes you can get God in a bit of a box and you can make him quite familiar. And I'd got to that, I think, a bit. And then suddenly you meet with other people who think differently, can introduce you to all these things you'd not thought of. And this community of love between Father, Son and Spirit, that, by the very nature of the being of God, that is love. It's hard to argue with that when you're thinking, does God love me? Doesn't he? He can't do anything else by the nature of how his being operates. And so I guess that is who God is to me now. It's this powerful community of love who invites us to be part of that community. That sounds very deep, doesn't it?
That was a big
I've
wow
surprised
moment.
myself there. Surprised myself.
That was amazing.
But that
I've
is
never
who
seen
God
anything.
is.
Please be recording. May the sound be okay. We had a laugh at the beginning actually about, when you haven't pressed record and you think you've done an interview and all that kind of stuff. Please be recording.
No, but yes.
Okay, that was brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so are you sitting comfortably?
Come on.
Okay, spotlight. Okay, these are very important questions. Okay, and there's a psychologist got hold of this. Who knows? Okay, the thing you can't live without.
Well, obviously my daughter and husband, but coffee. I love real ale.
Oh, really?
Not in excess. And Cornwall.
Yeah, I did 2 years of work in Cornwall. It was fabulous, really was. Job you'd most like to have? One show.
Okay, yeah, no, Ken Bruce's show on Radio 2, and then the one show as a side hustle.
Awesome. Keeping it real.
And,
sorry. There's more.
That's media. Do I need to think of a holy, priestly one?
It's up to you. It's sky's the limit.
Okay, because I just realised what a message that sent to the Church of England, who spent all that money on training me. I would do that as a priest.
Of course.
Yeah.
You know, I also see you as an actress.
Oh, interesting.
I can imagine you doing that. I
Yeah,
just
I'd
see
love
you
to
in
do that.
dramas. I really do.
Yeah.
Film star crush.
Oh, do you know, I haven't really had many pin-ups over the years. As a teenager, for some reason I liked Pierce Brosnan, but looking back, not really anymore. Daniel Craig.
Oh, right.
Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Go on then, I love him.
Cool.
Not.
If you could have a superpower, what would it be? I'm always surprised by this one.
It would be flying.
Yeah,
It's always flying, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's because I love Cornwall, who wants to sit on the M5 for hours and hours on end?
True.
I want to just whoosh, fly there.
Yeah. Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Dark,
Ketchup or brown sauce?
ketchup,
Can you reverse park?
of course I can. I'm a motorbiker as well, and I like to think that I'm pretty good on the old coordination.
Have you ever seen an angel?
No, I really want to though.
Yeah. Favourite virtue?
I love people who can make others laugh, because I love to do that. I think it's a real gift to have someone that can bring joy into a room. So if that's a virtue,
I'd say
I'm going to make that one.
it's a gift as well. Okay, it's about 3 now. You're in heaven for the first time and you meet Jesus for the first time face to face. What's the first thing that you'd like him to say to you?
Those are hard. I suppose, but it's such a cliche, but probably well done. Or welcome home.
A lot of people say that. A lot of
Yeah.
people say that. You're in heaven for the first time and you meet Jesus face to face for the first time. What's the first thing that you'd like to say to him?
Thank you.
Fran, this has been fantastic.
Well, I mean, I found it deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, Fran did actually say that. She's used to interviewing people, not being interviewed. But this has just been brilliant.
No, you are brilliant. I think you secretly you want a show, don't you? Shall I?
A show?
Maybe on Radio Nottingham, maybe nearer to where you live. If you just leave it with me, we'll see. We'll see to that.
Open to surprises, you never
Yeah,
know. But
yeah. No,
I
you're
can't
brilliant,
imagine
Chris.
this South London guy on TV.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, no, you're really good. Well done.
Thank you. I often say this is gold dust, but it truly, truly was. And I can't thank you enough for your honesty. I think this is going to touch an awful lot of people in terms of your journey, because it's one where I certainly share it, and I'm pretty sure countless people will as well. And that journey towards, knowing your self-worth is actually just in who you are in God's sight. That's just, that is the gospel. So on that healing note, would you mind praying us out?
Good idea. Lord, thank you that you are Father. And I thank you that it is your will to reveal your Father's love for each one of us. Thank you that we can know you. And I pray that through this chat we've had, there will be more that will get a glimpse of your unconditional love and grace, and how you long to complete us, to make us more ourselves than we have ever dreamed of by following you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.